us as members and patients.
Thanks, Andy. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Andy for inviting me here today. I'm really honoured to be here among you people. I don't know a lot about MPGN and DDD. Fantastic presentation by Dr. up there, giving me a little bit more understanding. I'd just like to give you an insight into the work of the Advocacy officer, the advocacy role that I cover at the moment. So, to start with, I'll tell you a little bit about how I became involved with renal patient support. In 1996, 19 years ago, my husband was informed that he had CKD. Came as a bolt out of the blue, and of course we went through the usual feelings of why him, what caused it, would there be a future, what effects it would have on our family life. We have a daughter, we were worried that she too may have problems in the future. It was then that I had my first contact with the NKF. I came across their number before we had Google in the local library. I rang them and they were an absolute brilliant support to me. They sent me the details of a local group where I lived at the time in Lincoln. I got in touch with them, and they were really great. They helped to raise funds for the renal unit in Lincoln. And so I joined this local group. My husband went through the treatment choices, dialysis and finally transplantation in the space of 4 years. And during this time, as I say, I helped our local group to raise funds. And sadly, in the year 2000, the chairman passed away and a new chair was needed. My name was put forward and I became the chair of the Lincolnshire Kidney Patients Association. So during my 12 years with the Kidney Patients Association, I've been involved in many projects, Department of Health initiatives, optimal renal care pilot projects, patient leadership courses, patient support courses. I served on the National Kidney Federation Executive Committee, but my real passion has always been helping to solve patient problems. We had no renal social worker back there in Lincolnshire, and I'd visit it was then 3 renal units in rural Lincolnshire, talking to dialysis patients and helping with anything I could. I also attended patient information days at Leicester General Hospital. I could be regularly seen struggling down the corridors with my information boards and my suitcase, as you've seen today, full of information leaflets and booklets, which I'd begged, borrowed or stolen from renal companies such as Baxter's and Fresenius. I've always been in full-time employment. I had 40 years in the catering trade whilst carrying out the voluntary work that I do with renal patients. In 2009, a family move to Yorkshire forced me to resign from the Lincolnshire Kidney Patients Association and the NKF executive. So I really missed being involved in the renal community. So when in 2011 I saw the advertisement in the Kidney Life for a part-time advocacy officer in the North East, Yorkshire and Humber region, I just knew it was for me. It was a chance to reduce my working hours, or so I thought. The NKF is unique because although there are large numbers of kidney charities, the NKF is the only charity run by kidney patients for kidney patients. Most renal units have kidney patient associations specifically attached to that unit. Now back in 1978, these 14 independent kidney charities realised that they needed a national organisation to fight their cause. Renal provision was in dire difficulties, overstretched and under-resourced. If ever there was a case of postcode provision, then renal disease was it. The National Federation of Kidney Patient Associations was formed, and 5 years later, in 1983, the first head office was opened. Currently, there are just over 50 kidney patient associations or support groups like yours who come together as the controlling council of the National Kidney Federation. These groups are both the ears and the eyes of the National Kidney Federation and its controlling force. Apart from 8 members of the office staff, all of the personnel at the NKF are either kidney patients or carers of kidney patients. So unlike other kidney charities, the National Kidney Federation only has 2 roles: campaigning for improvements to renal provision and treatments, and national patient support. Unlike other, on the campaigning side, they set up the All-Party Parliamentary Kidney Group. There's over 100 MPs and Lords established in Parliament. They feed that group on a day-to-day basis with information needed to keep the renal disease in front of the noses of government. Our Chief Executive Officer, Tim Statham, OBE, is the Secretariat for this group. There's lots of other campaigning which goes on behind the scenes that we don't shout about. The other role I mentioned is patient support. National Kidney Federation provides and maintains a website that's viewed by 200,000 patients, carers, renal professionals, doctors and nurses worldwide every year. For those who prefer to speak to someone direct, the NKF runs the helpline. This was established in 1999 and it takes on average 200 calls a week. NKF are the largest provider of renal leaflets in the UK, with more than 200 different titles, some of which you may have seen in the booklets that I've got on the table through in the other room. They produce the Kidney Life magazine, and for anybody who doesn't get a copy of this, there are some prepaid envelopes on the table in there. You can fill them in. Get this every, I think it's about every 3 months. Kidney Life comes out free of charge for any patient that wants it. It used to be called a news flash, and they changed it in 2000. We hold a national patient conference, and of course we've got social media now, so there's several NKF Facebook pages, Young NKF, NKF Fundraising, closed page for patients who need to speak to others in the position or just to let off steam. So sadly, problems continue for renal patients and their families, and frequently the helpline finds itself necessary to refer the matters onto its own advocacy service, and this is where I fit in. The NKF originally employed 3 advocacy officers for the whole of the UK, but now, thanks to funding from the British Kidney Patients Association, who supply continuous funding, 5 new posts were created. We have 7 advocates at present covering Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, London and the South East, the West Midlands, the South West, East Midlands and East of England, and I cover the North East, Yorkshire and Humber region. There's an NKF funded vacancy in the North West at the moment. So of the 5 new posts created by BKPA funding, 4 of us were employed on 25 hours a week contracts, and the Scottish Advocacy Officer on a full-time contract. So what do we actually do for patients? Well, my job is very varied. Chiefly we're there to empower patients so that they're able to tackle any problems they may encounter. Now if they feel they can't do this, then we're there to support them and speak on their behalf. If a patient contacts us with, say, a problem with a staff member perhaps, then we'll set up a meeting, find out what the problem is, see if we can't solve it in that way. 9 times out of 10, it's just a misunderstanding, and these problems are usually solved very quickly. I've helped with employment issues, holiday issues, blue badge applications, accommodation issues, home dialysis setup, a renal unit that maybe doesn't have access to renal social workers, or if the social work team are under pressure, we're available for them to call on us. Again, I've been involved in making referrals to council social adult teams for assessment for housing alterations, stair lifts, care packages. The list really is endless. So the big problem that we're encountering more and more is benefits. This is my benefits Bible. I don't let that out of my sight. So as you can imagine, more and more patients are finding themselves being either refused or being downgraded with the introduction of PIP, especially those patients who've had to change over from DLA. Many patients are finding that they no longer fit the criteria, especially for the enhanced mobility component. Some of them are even losing the right to a mobility car. But we're no means experts, but thanks again to funding from the BKPA, we've received benefits training, and we do our utmost to help and accompany patients to tribunals. We're not always successful, but if we're contacted early enough in the process, we have more of a chance to overturn decisions before it gets to a tribunal stage. There are other agents out there, such as CAB and Welfare Rights, and we've worked alongside these, as many don't have the renal knowledge. We have close links with KPAs and support groups and provide guidance for these associations. When I first came into the job, a KPA secretary got in touch to say that he wasn't very happy about the reimbursement he got for dialysing at home. It hadn't gone up in years, unlike his utility bills. We all know what electricity bills have gone up, over the few years. So I started to look into the matter, and with the help of my colleagues all over the country, we started to gather information from home dialysis patients about what they actually received and what it was for. Unfortunately, as I started to get busier with referrals, this had to sit on the back burner for a while. But eventually I've gathered enough information to be able to take it to the then NKF chairman, Kirit Modi, and ask if the NKF executive couldn't put pressure on the powers that be to look into the matter. Department of Health guidelines have not been updated since 1974. So I'm really happy to report that on Tuesday the 30th of June this year at the British Renal Society Conference in Leeds, the new guidelines, these here I have here, which I'd worked on closely with Karen Jenkins from BRS, were finally presented. I'd pestered and pestered for them to include reimbursement for automated PD machines to be included. And although the manufacturers of these machines say that they use very little electricity, I still insisted that the patient should be reimbursed. Even if it only works out at £120 a year, it was money that should be paid to the patient. They pay the bills. So the NHS service specification for renal states that providers should always inform patients about support that's available both locally and nationally. And I'm regularly asked by some hospital trusts to attend patient information days, be they newly diagnosed patients or transplant information days. I take along samples of our leaflets and Kidney Life magazines, along with other information that I think the patients will be interested in. Advocacy officers also represent the National Kidney Federation at many management and commissioning meetings, along with attending area network meetings to represent the patients and the carers. I'm at present involved in the exit planning of 5 renal units in the Humber region whose contracts have come to an end in 2016. And I'm also involved in the procurement meetings taking place to renew or replace them with new providers. In the area that I cover, there are 3 transplant centres, 2 paediatric renal centres and 34 renal or satellite units, which I try to visit on a regular basis. I'm finding it increasingly difficult in the time allowed for my job. It's very difficult to engage with home dialysis patients, so all we can do is make sure by putting up posters in clinics that they're aware of our service. I first became aware of this support group when I saw the campaign on Facebook which Andy and his family had started to have the drug funded by NICE. And when I realised that Abby lived in the area that I covered as advocacy officer, I immediately contacted Andy to see if the NKF could help in any way. I contacted the chair of the NKF, Jim Higgins, who gave me the go-ahead to use his name and that of the NKF in any way I saw fit to help with this campaign. Letters were sent out to NICE, NHS England and the pharmaceutical company. And it was quite ironic that at the British Renal Society event in June, the NKF stand manned by myself and a colleague was right next to the company who manufactured this drug. Needless to say, I spoke to those manning their stall in no uncertain terms, letting them know what I thought of the situation. We'll continue to be available if you need us. Use the NKF in any way you see fit. I believe our advocacy officer in the southwest is also in contact with one of your families. So I hope she's doing the same as I am. So, how do you get in touch and who can refer a patient to our service? Referrals to the advocacy service come from our own NKF helpline and more so from renal unit staff, clinicians, social media and self-referrals. Word of mouth, it soon gets around if you've successfully helped a patient with, say, a benefit appeal or a successful disability facility grant through their local council. When I first started as an advocacy officer about 3.5 years ago, I was getting 5 or 6 referrals in a month. Now I'm getting 5 or 6 every week. Some are simple, maybe asking how they can get a blue badge as their mobility has been affected. Or it can be a complex employment issue that can take several weeks and multiple phone calls and meetings to sort. I, like the rest of my colleagues, often run over our contracted hours, but because we're all so dedicated to helping patients, we've all been involved in some way, as either a patient or a carer, it's irrelevant, so we don't mind. I mentioned BKPA funding earlier as one of our roles in connection with this funding. We promote the grant scheme that BKPA have for all dialysis patients. We're able to countersign any application for a grant. We've got direct access in times of crisis to the patient grant manager, Christine, who does her utmost to help as soon as humanly possible in urgent cases. The advocacy team have regular conference calls together where we can confidentially discuss our cases and learn from each other. We do get together twice a year, once at the March AGM, usually held in Birmingham, where everyone is welcome, and again in October at our NKF conference. Now this has just taken place in Reading last weekend. Usually I have over 300 patients and carers attend over a 3-day period. It's a very special occasion and one that takes much organisation. However, it's very successful and it provides a platform for the NKF to listen to patients and for patients to tell the NKF where the shortcomings are in renal provision. Frequently, government ministers and healthcare professionals are on hand to hear from themselves the issues, but above all, it's an opportunity for a thorough exchange of views. We'd love to welcome you all if you can attend next year's. Most KPAs will fund some places at the conference. Of course, like you, we're a charity and none of this vital work could take place without funding. We receive no funding from government, so we rely on the generosity of the public to carry on with our work. You'll have seen next door the small NKF display that I brought, and as I said, our conference was on last week. Knowing I'd be here today, I acquired lots of freebies. So there's notepads, pens, bags. Please do take some. Save me carrying them home. So if you've got any questions, I'll be pleased to try and answer them, or if you'd like to speak to me in confidence, I'm available for the rest of the afternoon. I've left some business cards on the NKF stand, so please do pick one up, as you never know when you may need the help of the Advocacy service. Thank you.
Has anybody got immediate questions, Alison?
I just wondered if you've done any campaigning to get the prescriptions.
Is this transplant?
Yeah, because obviously people with thyroid problems, people like that get free prescriptions,
Yeah.
and transplant patients don't. And it's
Yeah,
a lifelong condition, as we all know.
This did come up at a recent council meeting about transplant patients having to fund their
I
own
work for
drugs.
our local MP, but it
Yeah,
doesn't do much.
yeah. There are some, they say they're introducing new illnesses that will be covered
apparently
soon, but
the-
yet nothing's come out for a long, long
The
time.
list was drawn up years ago,
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah. It is something that we were very wary to do in the early days because we were worried if we highlighted the transplant situation, would they then decide, well, I'll take it off dialysis patients as well.
Oh,
You know,
dialysis patients
so
get it?
dialysis patients, if they have a permanent fistula, are exempt.
Oh.
If they have a fistula, they can get an
So
exemption
if you've
form.
still got
for
your fistula working when you've had a transplant, does that mean?
That's a tricky situation because some GPs will sign to say that you have a fistula working. You know, it's your lifeline, your fistula. We all know that. You know, some GPs can be very generous and will interpret the rules differently. So it really does depend on the GP. But yes, this is something that has been talked about in the past at the NKF, and I'll certainly bring it up again and see if they're going to do anything about it. So that's all I can do. Bring
It's
it
not
up.
fair, really.
It's not fair. No, I totally agree. My own husband had to pay until he became 60, so you know we do know. And there's an awful lot of drugs that they do have to have sometimes.
Yeah,
So, and they've got other comorbidities as well. So,
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.